If there's no further speakers, the question. I call Jenny Salisa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take a call on this bill because it is one of the issues that our constituents at Manukau East come to see us on a daily basis about. Labor supports this bill with reservations to Select Committee, Mr. Speaker. We strongly support the wraparound services that encourage higher education with appropriate child care assistance, and we also strongly support extending the youth services to all 19-year-old beneficiaries with children. Labor supports this bill to Select Committee only at this time though, and I'd like to share some of the concerns that we have about elements of this bill. Mr. Speaker, young people are the future of our country. Our young people are currently suffering though because they are having to deal with housing which is way too expensive. They're suffering from poor educational outcomes. They have high rates of unemployment and very few pathways into jobs. In fact, 40% of our total unemployed in this country right now are young people, which is way, way too high, Mr. Speaker. And unfortunately, some of our young people, particularly Māori and Pacific young people, are going to end up in prisons. And given the fact that prisons has been highlighted lately in the last few days, it is not my wish, and probably not the wish of any other member in this House, for any of our young people to end up in prison. Mr. Speaker, the majority of the young people that this bill will apply to are most likely to be Māori and Pacific youth, and those who will come from low-income families. Earlier on today, Mr. Speaker, my colleague, Mr. Ngaro, stated that we all have choices, and I agree, as adults, we all have choices. However, for many of our young people, the choices that are available to them are limited in comparison to the choices that other young people from more affluent households actually have. Our children, they have no choice about being born into or growing up in child poverty, as another example. This government, however, it has a choice. It can choose to ensure that every child, that every single young person in this country have the same opportunities regardless of their socio-economic status. The government also can choose to address and to measure child poverty. The government, in considering the predictive risk modelling that this bill actually is proposing, has done so since 2012. The government later modified the predictive risk modelling and then decided to test predictive risk modelling, but only to enhance frontline decision-making about cases of suspected child abuse. Mr. Speaker, according to Professor Vai Nathan, predictive risk modelling may be used to enhance the decisions that child, youth and family make on the front line, but that will only be after abuse is suspected. This is worlds away from the predictive model that the research team proposed, which can identify children at risk early, more than 2 years before it occurs, and it can allow the preventive support and intervention that these children can actually access. What this bill proposes, Mr. Speaker, is worlds away from the predictive model that the research team proposed, which can identify children at risk early and so that they can address these issues much earlier on. Beneficiaries are being rated within MSD's framework of predictive risk model for the risk of long-term welfare dependency, but they are not being told that they are being rated or indeed what the grounds of this rating is actually based on. They have a right, I believe, Mr. Speaker, to this information, and they should be given a chance to ask questions and the opportunity to challenge the assumptions that are being made about them. They're effectively being researched without any information on how the research is being undertaken or the way in which the information might be used or the implications that it could have on the supports that they are likely to receive. Mr. Speaker, the Minister and her department ignored the most basic ethical procedure gaining information from participants, which is to obtain their consents. Given the fact that the majority of the so-called high-risk young people are going to be Māori and Pacific and those from low-income families, the question I'd like to ask the Minister, Mr. Speaker, is has her department taken into account how they will use this tool to rate and then to measure the cultural components of how it might affect Māori and Pacific groups? All of the young people in this country, Mr. Speaker, all of our young people deserve a better future, as well as to have equal opportunity for everyone to achieve. My colleague from the other side, Matt Ducey, also stated earlier on that this bill is important because it is about transitions and that it's about supporting our young people to transition during their life course. Well, right now, Mr. Speaker, too many of our young people are transitioning into NEET, not in employment, education or training. In fact, about 70,000 of our young people under the age of 24 are currently not in employment, education or training. That is way, way too many, Mr. Speaker, and it is an issue that this current government should actually address. This government talks a lot about being aspirational. Yes, that's right. We also agree that our young people should all be aspirational. But how about ensuring that many more of our young people actually leave high schools and are actually of the ability to be able to have literacy and numeracy skills that would enable them to get better jobs and to get ahead in life? Mr. Speaker, we, as I stated earlier on, are supportive of this particular bill, but we have major reservations moving forward with it. Thank you.
I call Jono Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.